Hello, welcome back to the channel. In this video, we are going to once again be talking about the latest episode of Moon Knight. This is episode number 2. To begin, I just wanted to mention that this series has honestly been quite interesting for me to get into because it's one of the first times where I know basically nothing about a character within the MCU. I haven't watched really any videos about him and I didn't want to get too much of a background, and I think that the show itself is doing a wonderful job with keeping us entertained and intrigued and wanting to learn more about this character, which ultimately makes it a good show. Now, getting into the actual episode, I want to mention that Steven loses his job at the very start. This happens because apparently no one else can see what Steven is seeing, which also, bearing in mind, makes him seem more insane, but at the same time we as viewers know that he's actually the Moon Knight character, that there is something else going on here. It's not just all what it seems to be. That being said, regardless, he does lose his job, and the saddest thing in this moment is that he loses his name tag. I don't think that was really necessary. I felt like that was a bit excessive on the part of the museum, but I guess it is their property. Moreover, from there, Steven is really digging deep, trying to find out what's going on and prove to himself whether or not this is actually real. As a result, he uses the key that he has and runs off to find the storage unit that Marc has been using, finds a bunch of cash, weapons, his passports, etc., and then there's another conversation between the two characters. Now, this fallout here I think is very interesting because it shows that Steven really just wants to live his life, and yet everything that's going on with Moon Knight, with Marc, with the Egyptian gods is ultimately just going to hurt him down the line. And obviously this is shown later on in the episode, which I will get to later in the video. This entire piece of the episode does a very good job with letting us empathize with this character and feel for him because he's just a normal dude. He's just trying to live his life, and I think that the creators of the show have done a wonderful job portraying that and making us empathize with this guy who's just trying to find a way through and navigate his life without any trouble, and the world around him, or even the world inside of him, the people in his head, are not allowing him to do that. Now, this whole scene, this altercation between Steven and Marc ultimately ends up with him running out of the storage unit. I believe Nabu is the god that is there as well, and he's chasing after him. And what ends up happening is he runs into Layla, who we find out is his wife. I thought this was a pretty cool reveal. I didn't expect them to be married, as well as, I didn't expect to see her right away either, because she was just a voice on a phone. How would she know exactly where to go? But it seems as though her and Marc were in a similar line of work, which kind of makes sense here as to how she's able to track him down. I really like their interaction because the whole time Steven is just getting pissed off at Marc and the things that he has done, his decisions, not really comprehending the purpose behind them. Moreover, Layla's kind of fed up at this point, and we get to see her and Steven kind of reconcile a little bit, even though, to Steven it's a completely new person, and Layla's starting to understand that there's maybe something more going on here than just Marc having left her, that there's this whole other person that exists. I don't know if she fully believes that he's Steven by the end of the episode, but I think she really can tell that something's off here and it's not really the same person that she knew. That being said, later on in the episode, Steven gets dragged back to Harrow's lair. We find out a little bit more that the cult that exists, that he created, extends beyond just the circles of the museum and wherever they were previously. We find out that essentially Harrow has found out about multiple personalities that are in Steven's head by eavesdropping on him, and that all he really wants is to get this scarab back, and ultimately he wants to resurrect Ammit in some way. Not too sure if this means like he'll or he or she, I'm not sure what you would call the god, but he wants to essentially resurrect Ammit. And as a result, this would probably mean a lot more people dying, and that doesn't really sound the best. I really liked this because it gave Harrow more of a motivation. It also showed his ties to Moon Knight and to the god that has currently chosen Mark as his avatar, because he was the previous avatar as well. This is also like adding a bit more depth in the dynamic here, and I just think it was pretty well done. And I thought that it was an interesting aspect to add on as the story progresses. The next thing I wanted to discuss is specifically with Mr. Knight's appearance here. From the moment that the posters came out, from the ideas that I had heard, where it was like we were getting multiple personalities from Marc and Steven, and then we had two different images for Mr. Knight and Moon Knight, right? What I knew previously from, I believe, a comic that I had listened to or heard some way, shape, or form. I think it was from Comic Storian way back when. It was a Moon Knight story in which he had different superhero personas that they were all different personalities, right? So I presumed that Moon Knight and Mr. Knight were two separate characters within Steven's head, right? And then after watching the first episode, I don't think I actually mentioned this, but I had at least a passive thought in my brain where I was like, oh, maybe different personalities are controlling each of the different suits. That's possible because it seems as though at the end of the last episode, or at the end of the first episode rather, Marc takes over as Moon Knight, whereas now Steven can take over as Mr. Knight. I just found this to be an interesting aspect of the character. I'm curious to know if this is also the same within the comic books, because I have no idea. I mean, that story that I had heard from Comic Storian was years and years ago, probably back when I was in high school, so I barely remember even a shred of that, but I just found it interesting, and I'm glad that I was right, even though I guess there's probably no proof of that. But regardless, I just found that to be an interesting aspect, and how they introduced a different suit as to why it exists, and it's because Steven thought, oh, suit, okay, I'll just dress up in a suit. Similarly, the actual fight that we get with Steven in here is hilarious. It's a lot of fun to watch. Just Steven try to get serious about the fight, rolling up his sleeves, tossing his actual blazer away. I mean, it was a lot of fun to watch. And also the cool aspect was seeing what Layla was seeing as well, which is just Steven being lifted up into the air, the responses from the people around him calling him like a fancy drunk. I mean, I thought it was pretty hilarious. The only thing I wish about this was that we probably got to see a little bit more of the Egyptian jackal, because I think it would have also looked a little cooler, but perhaps they just needed a reason to save some budget. I suspect that's what was happening there, but at the same time, I don't think that it really detracted. I just think it would have looked a little cooler to see more of the creature fighting Steven. Now, in the end of this fight, we get Steven relinquishing control so that Marc can finish off the jackal. The reason for this is, despite Steven having increased strength, being more capable in his Mr. Knight suit, he is not nearly as proficient in fighting, and he has no experience really using these abilities, whereas Marc has been doing this for some time, and you can clearly see that once the transition takes place. Unfortunately, this then leads to a confrontation with Marc yelling at Steven and smashing the mirror reflection. Beyond that, the conversation in which we realize that Layla is next in line to be the next avatar, and Marc doesn't want that for her. All of this culminates, and as a result, Marc fully takes over and essentially tells Steven to shove it, and that he's not going to let him get control back because he needs to get his work done. And as a result, Marc unfortunately takes over, and Steven is trapped inside his own body, watching in horror as Marc probably kills a lot more people and is essentially being enslaved by an Egyptian god. I thought that this story so far has been quite interesting, and I wasn't expecting it to take this quite a turn. I thought it was just going to be that Harrow was the villain, and it was going to be pretty standard, and it was just fighting him for the next few episodes. But now I'm like, well, I don't particularly hate Marc. I mean, I don't think that he's a villain, and on top of that, like, he is more reluctant to do what he's doing. He's doing it simply to protect Layla, and despite that, Steven is still being trapped in the body where he has no control over anything. And there are these Egyptian gods which are essentially screwing around with humanity. That's how I'm seeing it at the moment. I don't particularly think that the different gods are probably more or less immoral than the others, but I do think that the way in which that they're trying to control Steven and Marc, I mean, I think that that's pretty messed up either way, regardless of what they're trying to do and what they're trying to accomplish. So I think that that's pretty interesting on my end, in that it's not really as black and white as some of the other Marvel stories that we've seen. There's typically a villain and a hero, and sometimes a villain can become a hero later on down the line, for example, Loki, but that's a very rare case. But here we have a character that is pretty gray in that he has elements of goodness in him, but he's also doing horrible things, as we see through Marc. On the other hand, we have Steven, who I would say is just a decent, good guy completely, and just wants to get on with his life. That being said, I'm really excited to see what episode 3 has to hold and see how the rest of the season or the series goes about. That is all I have to say for this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed, please let me know and like the video as well. Subscribe for more videos from me on this channel, and I will see you next time. Have a wonderful day. Bye.